In the Invincible comics, Conquest is probably the second strongest Viltrumite, and today we're breaking down the evidence to see how powerful he actually is. Okay, so in Invincible Season 3, Conquest arrives on Earth, having been sent by the Viltrumites to take control of the planet. Right from the start, this implies to the audience that he's at least on the same level as Omni-Man, since only the highest ranked officers are allowed to single-handedly conquer planets. Now, in Season 1, Omni-Man easily defeated Invincible without even taking any damage, so the question is, if Conquest is equal or stronger than him, then why couldn't he do the same? One of the answers to this is that Mark is over 100% stronger than he was in Season 1. In fact, the GDA said that he was exactly 138% stronger. So bearing that in mind, he's over doubly as strong as he was when he fought Omni-Man. Having said that, the main reason why Conquest didn't win, it has nothing to do with his strength and everything to do with his mentality. Conquest openly admits that his main priority is to enjoy the fight that he's in, so instead of ending the battle quickly by using his full power, he likes to drag things out and test his opponents. During his fight with Invincible, the Viltrumite clearly saw this as a game and was actively encouraging Mark to fight harder rather than beating him quickly to death like he could have done. Tactically speaking, this was a very dumb thing to do because it gave Invincible time to gather allies, in particular Atom Eve. In the whole series, Eve at her full potential is something no other Viltrumite had to face, and I'd argue that if Nolan or even Thragg had to go through this, then yeah, they'd get pretty messed up as well. It was only because of Eve's intervention that Conquest got weakened to the point where Mark now actually had a chance. That doesn't mean that Mark is on his level, all it means is that Conquest was like a wounded animal at this point, and he couldn't use his full power even if he wanted to. For that reason, the fight between Mark and Conquest was more about tactical errors than it was about actual raw strength, and it didn't show us what he can really do. To find out his true potential, we have to dive into info from the comics, but as a warning, there will now be major spoilers ahead. Alright, so in chapter 75, it's heavily implied by Thragg, who's the Viltrumite leader, that Conquest is the second strongest Viltrumite. To be specific, there's a line where he says that even Conquest fears him, which is something you'd only say when talking about the next strongest person besides yourself. For example, if Conquest was the third or fourth strongest fighter, then why exactly would Thragg say this? He wouldn't have a reason. The only reason this line is intimidating is because everybody knows that Conquest is the second strongest, and therefore, if Conquest is afraid of him, then clearly Thragg must be the best. You know, it only makes sense if Conquest is number 2. To back this up, something we shouldn't forget is that during the Viltrum Civil War, where half of the population was killed by the stronger half of the population, Conquest was already an old man back then. You can see the grey hairs and the balding. He was old way back then, thousands of years ago, meaning that today he's probably the most battle-tested Viltrumite in history. If we look at the ages of certain characters, I think the only Viltrumite who might be the same age as Conquest is Thetis, but obviously Thetis, he manages the coalition of planets, but he doesn't really get out in the field too often, whereas Conquest has been conquering worlds for thousands of years. So yeah, like I said, I don't think there's a single person with more experience, going out there and actually killing people than him. This helps to explain why he never took Mark seriously, because in all of those thousands of years, you know how many people he's faced probably of the same level or even probably higher than this? Not to mention, he'd never failed to conquer a chosen planet. So, with a record like that, you're going to be arrogant, you're going to be bored to an extent, and all you would care about is finding a new challenge, someone to actually push you to your limits. This was proven beyond any doubt in their second fight, because even after losing to Invincible once before, Conquest still treated it like a game. His plan was to keep Mark alive until the very end, while killing the rest of his family right in front of him. This meant he had to divide his attention, and so while he was focused on Nolan and Oliver, Mark was solely just focused on him. Again, this was a massive tactical error from Conquest, and to explain why it's so bad, there's one thing we have to remember about their species. Before any Viltrumite can travel in space, they have to take a huge breath, and then hold that breath for days or potentially weeks until they arrive somewhere where they can breathe again. When Oliver ran out of air, he had to fly to the nearest planet, and Conquest followed him, expecting that he'd be able to take a breath as well. Where he messed up is that he never checked behind him, allowing Mark to slam Conquest into the ground. In this way, Conquest lost all of the air that was in his lungs, and he didn't get the chance to breathe again, since Invincible instantly began strangling him. By this point in the story, Mark was described as being almost as strong as Omni-Man, not to mention he was fully invested in this fight compared to the guy who was at first just messing around and seeing which of the Graysons he could kill first. Therefore, to win, he didn't need to be more powerful than Conquest. Instead, he just needed to have the willpower to hold onto Conquest's neck until he dies from lack of oxygen. For me personally, I feel like if Thragg was in this situation being strangled, he could have easily removed Invincible's hands. So what this showed us is that Thragg is obviously number 1 by a mile, and Conquest just wouldn't stand a chance against him. To put it another way, the gap between Thragg and Conquest is way bigger than the gap between Conquest and Mark, explaining why even when he did get serious, he still couldn't remove Mark's hands. Now, we have to acknowledge that the older Viltrumite was only in this position because he underestimated the exact same opponent. And I guess what this shows is that his arrogance was ultimately his main downfall, rather than it being a problem with his strength. I mean, obviously, if he was overwhelmingly stronger than Mark, then yeah, he could have still survived this. So it's a mixture of arrogance plus the fact that he was strong, just not so overwhelmingly strong that he could get out of any situation. Having said that, even without any air in his body, Conquest was still able to slice through Mark's spine, which is a hard thing to do considering that Viltrumites are tough and that he was close to Nolan levels of strength. In my opinion, this moment was the closest we got to seeing Conquest's full potential, because he knew he was about to die, and so, he just had to give it everything he had at the time. Unfortunately for him, he picked the one person with more willpower than anyone, and Mark was willing to die for this fight. He didn't want to die, but the fact that he held on even when he was getting destroyed like this, it shows that he was willing to go there. Overall, when we consider the fear that other characters have of Conquest and the reputation that he's gained over the years, he has to be the second strongest Viltrumite, at least when he arrived on Earth. And he only lost to Mark twice due to a distinct lack of strategy, which itself was caused by arrogance and boredom. As a quick side note, on the Invincible soundtrack, Conquest's theme is genuinely called Second Strongest Viltrumite. So with that, I rest my case. As always, thank you for watching the video, and subscribe for more videos on Invincible and also other series that I'll be breaking down pretty soon. Until the next one, peace out.